Alright, so listen. Ever since my last video, I was so preoccupied with school that I was unable to work on anything else, especially power scaling related content. However, on Saturday, I finally had enough time to work on a video, but the script became so long that I won't be able to drop it as soon as I'd like to. At the same time, I was thinking about an argument popularized by Putin on Instagram, where a Twitter account says that Garou has enough power to shake the universe. I put one and two together and decided that I should postpone my other video, which is also related to One Punch Man, and work on this one instead. That way, I can talk about a topic that I'm somewhat interested in and drop a video this week. Moreover, this video has a relationship with my other video, as said video is about whether or not the clash between Saitama and Garou actually destroyed multiple star systems, if not galaxies. So if this argument is valid, then it can work as supporting evidence for that video. But if this argument is flawed, then it cannot be used and defeat must be argued by itself. Now, with all of that being said, let's get into it. I basically laid it out in the introduction, but I'll regurgitate it here. An account on Twitter claims that Garou has become strong enough that he can shake the entire universe. This Twitter account has an official relationship with One Punch Man, as it is the digital publisher of the One Punch Man manga. Moreover, Murata, the illustrator for One Punch Man, even commented below the tweet thanking them for their support. If we take this statement as true, then it would be a multi-galaxy level feat at the bare minimum. It can be higher depending on the degree of vibrations, as what a shake essentially is the movement of particles around a point or line of equilibrium. In literal terms, what this argument is saying is that Garou is powerful enough that he can emit waves omnidirectionally all across the entire universe, to the point he can cause the particles of all substances to vibrate by a notable extent. It's similar to how an earthquake is the shaking of the surface of the earth that is produced by acoustic energy traveling through it and shaking its atoms. It's just that in this case, the earth as a medium is being replaced by the entire universe, and the acoustic waves are being replaced by waves that can travel in the vacuum of space by means of adiabatic loading and unloading. There are many problems with this argument. Firstly, I'll talk about the source of the claim itself. As stated previously, this claim comes from a Twitter account that has official association with One Punch Man. However, this association comes from the serializing department rather than the writing department. You see, the account that made this tweet is called Tonari no YJ, which stands for Tonari no Young Jump, with Torani no in this context meaning my neighbor. In their Twitter bio, they refer to themselves as quote-unquote Shueisha's webcomic site, My Neighbor Young Jump Official. Going to their website and clicking the About section, all I could find was a statement which I interpret as meaning that they're an online comic publisher. This is supported by the aforementioned, and it is also supported by the fact that when I look them up, what I find is that My Anime List has them listed as a magazine. I couldn't find a Wikipedia article or page detailing anything about them. But what I did find is that the second paragraph of the One Punch Man Wikipedia page says, quote, a digital manga remake began production on Shueisha's Tonari no Young Jump website in June 2012. When I click the Tonari no Young Jump hyperlink, it carries me over to Weekly Young Jump's Wikipedia page. This, alongside the fact that the Tonari no Young Jump About section credits the Weekly Shonen Jump editorial department as writers of the About section, leads me to believe that Tonari no YJ is like a branch of Weekly Shonen Jump, or is heavily associated with them. On top of that, it is pretty self-evident that Shueisha owns them, as they themselves imply it, and the copyright section of their website is that of Shueisha's. Given Shueisha is basically a publishing company for Japanese things, the validity of the statement Tonari no YJ makes on Twitter promoting a recent chapter of One Punch Man already seems shaky, given they're the serializer of the comic and don't appear to be related to the writing department at all. Secondly, I'll talk about another claim the source makes. When promoting another One Punch Man chapter, the Twitter account for the publishing company says, quote-unquote, the battle between Saitama and Garou goes into a higher dimension. I could go into why this claim is wrong, but I'll do so in an easier way, which is by applying Occam's razor. What's more likely? That they're saying that Garou and Saitama, through battle, have transcended the three-dimensional realm and became higher dimensional entities / entered a higher dimension, or that it's simply a use of a figure of speech known as a hyperbole in order to aggrandize the reality, which is that the battle between the two has intensified. I believe the latter definition is more likely, and it goes to show that this Twitter account will not shy away from using figures of speech to promote new serials of the comic they host. It makes sense. After all, they're a publishing company and their goal is to attract readers to their website, so their use of hyperbole should be par for the course. Something interesting to note here is the distinction between literary literalism and literary liberalism. I won't get into it in depth here, as these concepts deserve a video of their own. But basically, when you perceive information that is either written or spoken, you can interpret it in one of two ways. The first way is the way of the literalist, which is when you take the literal meaning of it. When you do this, your interpretation presupposes that the information is absolutely representative of reality, and it affirms the negation of the use of any figures of speech. The second way is the way of the liberal, which, not to be confused with liberalism as a political doctrine, is more free with its interpretation of what the information means. They take into consideration figures of speech and sometimes argue against the literal meaning of something. These definitions represent the radical versions of these two viewpoints. One doesn't have to be either or, as they exist on a spectrum. In power scaling, many people have a propensity to lean closer to literalism, as they rigorously adhere to the exact words that are said in order to amp the verses they are scaling to what is sometimes unrealistic heights. Many power scalers believe that literalism should be inherently assumed unless there is evidence indicating that this may not be the case. But that's enough about that. Let me move on to the third point. Thirdly, I'll talk about what appears to be a contradiction. In chapter 168 of the One Punch Man manga, Saitama becomes so strong that his sneeze blows away Jupiter's entire surface. Witnessing this, Garou becomes extremely perplexed. But why? But why? If he can shake the entire universe, then surely blowing away the surface of a single planet shouldn't warrant a reaction like this. One may be tempted to retort by saying that the reason he's surprised isn't because of the feat itself, if not that what caused the feat was Saitama's sneeze. One may also be tempted to retort by asserting that Garou follows up this statement by saying that because of this feat, Saitama is a monster that shouldn't be allowed to roam the earth. Garou then says that the same thing applies to him, which implies that he could also do what Saitama did. The problem with the first retort is that if, let's say via a punch or 1,000 punches, Garou can shake the universe, the energy difference between the complete obliteration of Jupiter and shaking the entire universe is on an incomparable scale. On the other hand, the energy difference between sneezing and a fully powered punch is likely hundreds of billions of trillions of times closer than that of shaking the universe and destroying Jupiter. Meaning that if Garou physically scales to the shaking of the entire universe, then he should have absolutely no reason to be surprised here, as he should be able to blink and erase the entire solar system. The problem with the second retort is that it is a non sequitur. Garou is not saying that he can also perform this feat. Whether you believe he can or not is irrelevant. Rather, he is saying that he is also a monster that should not be allowed to roam the earth. Both of them being monsters that should not be allowed to roam the earth does not mean that their strength is equal or that they are both on the same level. An entity that can destroy a star and an entity that can destroy a galaxy can be called monsters that should not be allowed to roam the earth. However, a star-destroying entity being perplexed by the strength of a galaxy-destroying entity and then saying that both themselves and the galaxy-destroying entities are monsters that should not be allowed to roam the earth is not an indication of their relativity. This is not to say or negate that Garou and Saitama are star and galaxy destroying entities. Rather, it is to show how the second retort is flawed. Again, it doesn't make sense for Garou to be that surprised that Saitama is capable of doing that to Jupiter if he can shake the entire universe. Fourthly, I'll talk about Murata's non-rebuttal of the claims. Okay, so just because Murata's tweet didn't refute the claim or contended with it, doesn't mean he agrees with it or endorses it. This is an argument of silence, as it is using Murata's lack of a retort as grounds for agreement with the statement. It also presupposes that if Tonari no Waije made a false claim, Murata would have corrected them. In my second point, I explained how I believe this tweet made by Tonarino YJ is hyperbolic rather than literal. If you agree with me, then you would also agree with the fact that Murata would not correct an inaccurate or hyperbolic statement, since he replied to that tweet as well by just thanking them. With all of those points out of the way, what am I actually trying to say? Well, I believe this statement, and by virtue of the argument, is invalid. My reasoning for this is that 1. The source of the claim is a company whose job it is to promote and publish digital comics, meaning that it's unlikely that anything they say relating to the power of a character is credible as being anything other than hyperbolic written hype fuel for increased website traffic. 2. They have made hyperbolic statements surrounding One Punch Man chapters in the past, which enforces the first point and shows a predisposition to hyperbolic language. And 3. Even granting the argument results in contradiction with the actual manga. In my opinion, this statement is most likely a hyperbolic piece to promote the chapter dropping so that people will click on it, and it's unlikely that it was meant to be taken literally. Even if it was a statement within the comment made by a narrator or like one of those chapter comments at the end or beginning of a chapter to create hype and suspense, I would argue that it would have still been hyperbolic, and that the quote-unquote terrifying power that can shake the universe is symbolic and refers to Garou becoming so strong that they can say he shook the foundation of all of society. Like he eclipsed all heroes and became a symbol of fear to the point that basically no one can stand in his way. The shake in the sentences refers to him disrupting the monster hero power balance alongside the balance of the world. The universe in the sentence actually refers to all the people on Earth, or all the heroes that witnessed him. Therefore, the quote-unquote terrifying power that can shake the universe actually means that the power he attained was so great he could disrupt the entire power balance of the world. To visualize, let's say that there are two scales that have sand in them and that they're around the same weight. The sand represents the power of all heroes, excluding Saitama and possibly Blast, and all monsters or villains, excluding Garou and possibly Boros. Now let's say that you have this massive rock, and you can only put this massive rock on the scale to the left, which is the scale that represents the power of all the monsters or all the villains. That massive rock is Cosmic Fear Mode Garou, who can disrupt or shake the entire world / society or the universe. I'm pretty sure what I'm trying to say here is being understood. Many people may disagree, but in my opinion, this makes far more sense than the literal interpretation, which is in contradiction with the events within the comic itself. And as a reminder, what I just said is working under the hypothetical that this was stated within the story itself, which it wasn't. So yeah, that's about it. I don't believe this statement is valid and it shouldn't be used to scale Garou. Bye.